University of South Carolina, which is located in Charleston. I am a PAS2, which is considered a senior. And yeah, it's nice to meet
And my name is Sydney Thames. I am a clinical year student. I'm at Drexel University up in Philadelphia. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, but I moved to Philadelphia specifically for PA school. So I guess we can go ahead and just talk a little bit about what our experience has been like, kind of like a day in the life as being PA students. So I'll speak about my didactic year experience. So during didactic, a typical day consisted of lectures from 8 to 12, usually from Monday through Friday. And we did have a lunch break every day from around 12 to 1. And then in the afternoons, it kind of varied. We would have sometimes labs where you would learn your skills, such as like suturing and putting in IVs. And then sometimes we would have seminars as well, where we would kind of discuss what it's like to be a provider and like case presentations and a little bit of clinical reasoning through various patients we may encounter in practice. And then in the evenings, I would usually study after classes.
So my experience during didactic was pretty similar to Sydney's. Like first class would start at maybe 8 in the morning. They would go pretty back to back, and this was virtually, of course. Um, so maybe 12, we'd have maybe an hour and a half for lunch, and then you kind of meet back up around 1:30, and classes continue until maybe 4 or 5. Occasionally, we had lab days, kind of similar to what Cindy was speaking on. So, practicing skills, getting more familiar with like ultrasound machines, reading scans, and stuff like that. Um, I was also a night studier. I did just stuck better for me during the evening. So, I would say take a small break after classes were over, eat dinner, and then kind of get started on like extra work, homework, breaking up and writing down what we learned for the day. I was really big on study guides because that's how I kind of learned. So, filling in the study guide with the new material from the day, maybe prepping for material from the next day. And I think we're both in clinical year right now, right, Tini?
Yes, we are.
So we're both kind of out in the field right now. So that pretty much varies from clinical to clinical. But right now I'm doing pediatrics, outpatient. So maybe in the office from 8 to 5, you get a standard maybe 30-hour lunch break, depending on how busy the office is. But it's pretty much like a work day. And you study when you can, when you get off, take a small break to kind of do some self care things and hit right back at it.
Right. So, kind of similarly to what Ivy explained, clinical year is a bit different because you're essentially working full time and then are still having to manage in time to study, after some shifts sometimes, or like being able to fit it in and fit it in during the weekends. So, of course, your schedule would depend on the rotation that you're on. If you are on a surgery rotation, the hours may be a little bit more inconsistent than if you were at, say, like your internal medicine outpatient rotation, where it's typically a 9 to 5. But for me, typically, I will, of course, complete my shifts throughout the week. And then sometimes I'll study and review in the evenings with practice questions. And then, of course, on the weekends, I try to fit in time as well to cover some material. And I know Ivy kind of spoke about her study habits. I guess I can mention mine as well during didactic. I was a huge Quizlet user in didactic. I found it to be very active learning and a great way to kind of quiz yourself and make sure that you're retaining the information that's necessary for you to do well in your exams. So I mainly use Quizlet and then some outlines in the form of study guides as well. And so, yeah, I think we were both really happy to answer any questions if anyone has any specific questions in the chat about what our free time may look like in PA school, or, if we're still able to exercise or spend time with family or friends. I'd love to answer any questions you all may have.
Okay, so free time ultimately would depend on if you're doing didactic or clinical. Um, and kind of the schedule that you set up for yourself. I think one of the hardest things for me was to realize that PA school is challenging, but you got to kind of be consistent and persistent with yourself, saying this is the time frame that I'm going to study and this is the time frame that I'm going to dedicate to me, because if not, you will go insane. So maybe during the week I give myself an hour, a couple hours during the day. Say on a Monday, I take an hour and a half to go on a walk or to go to the gym. Tuesday, I'll use that same hour and a half to do practice questions. So it's really all about that different balance depending on what stage of, your career that you're in.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, well, just to emphasize what Ivy said, free time, making time to have free time is completely necessary and required, I think, for your sanity in order to keep up your stamina to continue to perform well. I am a morning person, so I would wake up early and like work out before class usually. That was a huge part of my free time, and then I also tried to bundle like some household duties with like still getting in like some miscellaneous things. So like watching a Netflix show while I'm like doing my dishes or like doing laundry, things that have to get done, but things that also using that time to really enjoy the things that that you enjoyed previously, like talking to family or friends. So I found that to be a super helpful way to kind of make sure that I was still able to do things that I enjoyed, but then also, take care of myself in my living environment and kind of balance things in that aspect. Clinical year, you do have a bit more free time, I would say, than didactic, just because the exams can be very heavy and didactic, and it requires a lot of consistent studying. I do have more free time on the weekends in clinical year. I am able to kind of go out to brunch or like do more things on the weekends in clinical year, but it really just varies on where you are in the program in your program.
Um, Dr. Murray said, describe your very first semester of PA school. Um, the good, the bad, and the ugly. No, I'm kidding. Um, it was definitely challenging, but and Dr. Murray can kind of attest to this. It kind of pulls your strings, especially if you're not used to being in a higher pressure situation. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you have to find your reasoning. And there have been many a time where myself and Dr. Murray have spoken, and I'm like, I can't do this. I got to go home. I got to see my family. And she's like, you know what? You will continue, keep doing what you're doing. You have this amazing support system behind you. Take a breath, take a minute for yourself, and just kind of, do it. And you do. And I think it's a rite of passage for everyone to get a little overwhelmed at first, because you're essentially drinking from a fire hydrant most of the time that you're in PA school, but you kind of manage it and realize that it's not as bad as, you initially thought. Um, Pretty much just figuring out where you belong in the class, where you belong in the profession, switching over from a competition state of mind as far as like applying to school versus a coworker state of mind. Because after you kind of get into school, these are your peers. So it's really up to all of you to push each other as a unit versus I need to get into this school, the mindset that you had before. So I think once that switch kind of happened and you kind of get settled in like your studying habits and like your ability to manage free time, it it balances itself out and gets a lot better.
Yes, I agree. So my first semester PA school, it was definitely a huge learning curve. I think, especially because I moved to a new city, so I did relocate to a whole other state actually to attend PA school. So I was having to adjust to a new environment, and new surroundings, and also adjust to a new program. So it was definitely tough. I would say that you will be amazed at what you're able to accomplish. I know in my first semester, just feeling like kind of like what Ivy said once again, kind of like drinking from a fire hydrant, where you feel like you don't know how things are going to get done, but you'll be amazed at your growth that you will be able to the growth that you'll be able to obtain in that first semester, and really how you'll be able to grow throughout the program in total. And I think most programs, they kind of it's a building block. So it is a learning curve, and they are going to challenge you, but they're also not going to give you things that are unattainable. So just keeping that in mind and keeping that insight, that really helped me, and knowing that other people have done this before, so I can too. So I guess we can answer the next question. So Dawn Dillon said, "Is it difficult managing your personal life with your career?" I think it can be difficult. I think there are certain times in PA school where, certain areas of your life may get more attention than others. And I think that is reasonable. In didactic, you may spend more time, studying, not, or not may, I'm sorry, you most likely will spend more time studying than you are with your family and your friends. But, once you get into clinical year, you can kind of balance it out more. And I think really just being able to find that balance for you, while still being able to take care of yourself, that is that it can be super attainable that way.
Absolutely. To kind of mirror what Cindy said, and I'm gonna. I hope I'm not slaughtering your name. I think it's Micaiah. Bundle that into what we kind of just spoke on. It really depends on what you do, and like Sydney said, you kind of learn to be flexible. And I guarantee someone, if not all the people in your program, directors and stuff, will tell you to be gummy because there's going to be so many different things coming at you. And that's not to say good or bad. It's just like deadlines and family issues and things like that. So you kind of are able to mesh those things and figure out, okay, what needs attention first. And I think that was one of my biggest things too. Okay, I have a test coming up tomorrow. Everything's okay at home. They'll understand if I don't talk to them for a few days. And especially during didactic, I had um, the week before exams, we had maybe 4 or 5 in one day or a 2 day span. Um, I wouldn't really talk to my family. I'm from out of state, and that was kind of our only communication. I would call them like while I was cooking, check in, say, "Hey, I'm doing good." After that, back to studying, back to questions, and family kind of has to adjust too to understand that this is now your career. This is now something that you are seeking after, something that you desire, and those couple days are nothing when it comes to, figuring out your exams, figuring out your work, figuring out your schedule, where you need to be. And that weekend, if not later that day, you're right back on the phone with them. You can be right back with them, go out to dinner, or go out to brunch like Sydney likes to do. Um, it's just about maneuvering the schedule to fit what you need to do that week. And it really is prioritizing that career and your family and friends understanding you being like you making that prioritization.
Yes, I definitely agree. I hope we kind of touch and answered that question about managing our life outside of school. So I think Jessie Libiser, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but she said, "Do we have experience or classmates with experience with caring for kids while in school?" Definitely. I have, I could probably count like one hand about so my program is a class of 80, and I would say out of that 80, around 5 or 6 of them do have kids, and they are able to manage it in school. I do not have kids, so I can't personally speak on what their schedule looks like or the challenges, or how PA school may look like for them. But I will say that I do have classmates who are doing it, and who are excelling in doing it. So I definitely have seen that it is very attainable.
Yeah, synonymous to what Sydney said. We've had people have kids during PA school. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 people who have had kids during PA school, and then a few others came in with kids. So it really just depends on like that person. I don't have kids, so I can't really speak to it unless we count my plants, but that's about it. Um, so yeah, they seem to be doing really well. Um, Angelia, I'm sorry. Um, would we feel comfortable speaking about financial situations? Yeah, sure, I don't mind. So I'm mainly using loans to cover PA school finances. Um, Most programs ask you not to work, and I would think that's a plausible thing to do, not just because they don't want you to make money, but you have to think that during clinical year, you're working full shifts. You're working in 8 to 5, whatever hours your preceptor is working, you're working those hours. And to come home and to want to study and work another job, part time or full time, I mean, somebody's probably done it, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's just a sanity type thing. And then with didactic, they ask you to be flexible. So they could move around a test or move around an assignment or ask you to come in to do a skills check in, maybe 24, 48, 72 hours before. And most jobs don't readily allow you to have that time off unless you have like someone to cover, or even just another sanity thing like Sydney and I were talking about. It's like 8 to 5 in class, either in person or virtually, and then time for yourself. And to want to do a job kind of seems like a stretch. I know some people who started clinical, or not clinical, didactic, off with jobs, and I know all of them have quit since.
Yes, so similarly to Ivy, I am also completely funding this education through loans, as well as living expenses. So, just in case anyone isn't familiar, there are unsubsidized or subsidized loans that you can get through through your school, and then there's also the Grad Plus loan, which I know a lot of people, if not most people, do have to take out to cover their living expenses as well. And so that is my financial situation. I think really just recognizing that this is a huge investment, in your career. And so, you may forfeit, having income in the meantime in order to become a PA. And so just keeping in mind that it is an investment and kind of weighing, the pros and cons of working a few shifts a week and, making money, but then maybe sacrificing not excelling in as well in PA school. That can be something that I think that should be considered. So yes, most programs do not recommend working. I would say if you can, then I would not. I do understand that some people, you have to do what you have to do sometimes to make the most out of your situation, but just recognizing that it is an investment. And so, forfeiting income in the meantime, it will be worth it for a payoff in the end. So Heather asks, how can students prepare for the workload level that comes with PA didactic training? So I think one, knowing what kind of learner that you are, and then knowing which times of the day you study the best. Because I think a lot of people, we some people are more visual learners, some people are more auditory learners. And so just keeping that in mind in order to be able to keep up with the workload and be able um, to understand the information as not as fast as you can, but in a reasonable amount of time. I think that is key. And I know for me, when I got to PA school, I kind of felt like I had to I don't know, like start all over, with my study habits. And while PA school will challenge you more than you may have been challenged in didactic, I'm sorry, in undergrad, you have to keep in mind that like you have been challenged in the past and you have these study habits and study patterns that have gotten you, a seat in a program. So continue on with those study skills and those study patterns, and don't feel like you have to kind of start fresh or like you have no tools, because you already do have tools because you've gotten there. And then just to speak on the workload again, I would say knowing which time of the day you are the most proficient in learning. Like for me, I'm a morning person, so I wake up early and I start studying early because I know as the day goes on and after classes, I'm just not retaining as much. Whereas some people, they are like night owls and, studying at 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning, that works really well for them. So I would say just kind of analyzing those things prior to starting would be useful.
Yeah, Sydney articulated that beautifully. The only thing that I would add is be willing to be flexible about looking for new study methods and new study habits. Um, I was not always a study guide person. I was pretty good visually in undergrad. So coming to PA school, that was kind of one of my biggest adjustments, was finding additional methods that kind of solidified the way that I already learned. And it's okay to kind of add different little layers to how you learn, even going from chapter to chapter to chapter, not even just semester to semester. It's all really to help you retain the information, understand the information, and be able to apply it long term. So anything that helps you with that is key, really. It's okay to change certain things if you feel like you need to. It's okay to add certain things. It's okay to reach out for help too, and that's always a good thing. Um, be consistent and persistent about your studying times and your studying habits. If you know that you need 2 hours to study, to sit down to focus, do it. get set a timer, do your 2 hours, and then get up and roam around, rummage, cook food, go for a jog, do what you like to do. But at least make sure that you get that definite 2 hours in, or whatever your time frame is. And then if you go longer because you're focused, do it. And if you don't, then don't, because some days will be better than other days. But it's about finding that balance and being easy on yourself, but persistent, because you got to get the material.
I agree. So it looks like Rachel Stout. So she asked, do we feel that we have enough time to study, spend time with family and friends, and do your self care? So I think we kind of touched on this earlier. I think, yes, you have time, but your time would just look differently. In didactic, you're going to most likely have less time to spend with family and friends, and more time studying. Whereas in clinical years, sometimes you can balance that out a little bit more. So I don't think it's like a even playing ground all the time. I definitely think it's like some bumps where some during some instances or periods in your program, you are going to have to give more time to one area than another.
Exactly. I will definitely agree to what Sydney said. Hold on, I'm trying to find the questions again. um, yeah, it's kind of the same as Cindy said and what we touched on before. It's pretty much up to you to make that schedule, and it's okay to miss things. I know fear of missing out is a really big thing, but it's okay to miss things. It's okay to take the time for yourself to study. It's okay to be late. It's okay to go to things, and it's okay to devote the next day to full studying. It's really, like I said, about that balance, giving yourself sanity and socialization if you're that person, while also focusing on your career, because it's an investment and it's a rather large one at a time.
Yes.
Um, Andy, do you have a capstone project, presentation, or a master's thesis? What is a capstone? Okay, so there's a couple questions here. So yes, and I believe most programs do. So for my program, there was a course built in. The name of it's escaping me right now, but we were pretty much put into groups with similar interests. Mine was women's health, and we did the infertility epidemic as well as diabetes. Um, during pregnancy, and you kind of work together. They'll give you some class time, and then some personal time. We did a presentation, we did poster boards, and we kind of just did a question and answer session during the poster board session, kind of running through the board really quickly, seeing if people had questions, kind of giving the high points. We also had to turn in a paper about it, with sources and research and things like that. And that was our capstone project. I know that other schools do like singular ones. So each person has a project that they do research on and turn in information on. So it really varies by, the curriculum varies by school, obviously. And then I think as far as doing well on the capstone project and what your school will do, if you don't do well, I think that's ultimately up to them. It's not straight across the board. The thing about PA school is that we're all here to learn the same material, but the way that they go about it and the way that they structure the program can be vastly different.
Yeah, so similarly to Ivy, we also do have a capstone project or a master's thesis. That is what I believe gives us our Master of Science, is completing that thesis statement, or part of what allows us to obtain that Master of Science. And so the way that my program does it, every program will do it differently, but for us, it's two separate courses that are spread out amongst two separate courses spread out among two different quarters. And so it's a series of papers based off of a topic that we have chosen. And the topic requires doing some research, like some literature reviews, and implementing the project, and writing and speaking about like evaluating the project, and also any evidence based medicine that you were able to come across throughout the project. And so that's kind of how it's weaved into my program. And then if we don't do well, we'll be placed on academic probation. So I'm assuming, I mean, I think, most programs, ideally you should be having like frequent communication with your program or with your advisor for the project. So I don't think it's like, you don't, at the last minute whether or not you're going to, pass or, not do well in it. So it should be more of a linear process to where you would get like a heads up, or like, some feedback if you are not on the right track to excel in it. So that's how I would answer that question. I'm not really sure exactly if it could result in dismissal. That seems a bit harsh. I think most programs would be willing to work with you and have that communication, but we definitely do have one, and it is required. And then, um, so let's see. Trying to find questions that we haven't answered. Is the clinical year on rotations the same as the first year of didactic? So it's in separate years. So most programs, they are structured a little bit differently, but similarly in the same in the sense that you usually go through about a year or so of didactic, which is when you're in the classroom, when you're having your lectures and learning your skills and having frequent communication with your classmates and your professors. And then you have another 15 months or so of being in the field on your clinical rotations, where you are completing your rotations, your core rotations, and interacting with patients.
Uh,
And
Sorry.
sorry, I was just going to tie that into the next question. What was the
Exactly.
didactic exam schedule like weekly? So, so I guess on a weekly basis, I would say we would usually have about two or three exams per week. That's usually how it was in my program, and those exams would be like on a Tuesday and a Friday, or like a Monday and a Thursday. Usually about 2 or 3 days spread out between those exams, but it really varies on the quarter as well.
Yeah. So for my didactic exam schedule, we would test once monthly, and we would have 4 to 6 exams on a Monday. So you would have them within their same class time frame, but you would just be taking an exam, move on to the next, move on to the next. And it really just depended on what we were learning. To say if we had 4 exams because they were able to push things into one, or we had 6 smaller exams that we had to take because it was just a lot of material. Um, how do you manage a clinical rotation you don't like? You like all clinicals. um, if it's just a matter of opinion saying, maybe you don't like what you're doing or you're kind of bored or it's different than something else you've done, you still push on and you like that rotation because there's something to be learned from every preceptor you have. Every single one. There's something to be learned skills wise, there's something to be learned information wise. And I think you really make the clinicals what they are. Because if you go in and you're like, well, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, that's how the whole clinical rotation is going to go. But if you try to find ways to tailor it to things that you like to do, or you like to, be inquisitive about the things going on, or you're trying to interact with your preceptor, they're going to feel that and allow you to do more, try and get you involved in more things. Even with I had a women's health rotation, and I told them that that was something I was interested in. They had me on call my first weekend there. They had me helping to deliver babies maybe 4 to 5 days into the rotation. I'm sitting in on C-sections and helping. So be assertive, show that you want to be there, even if you're like, well, I don't want to do internal medicine. So find a way to want to do internal medicine because you need every single skill.
Yes,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. This is when you're on rotations, you are building up your professional relationships. And so, at some point you will graduate, you will have to apply for jobs, and you will need recommendation letters. And then you also never know the connections and the communications you may be able to maintain with your preceptors, even if you don't enjoy the rotation, whether that be because you don't like the preceptor or the specialty itself. But just keep in mind that this is your career and you have to remain professional. You never know who you may come across twice. And so, yes, definitely make sure that you keep that professionalism intact and just excel and learn, and just push through to finish out the rotation and do well.
Um, Study tips that are different from undergrad to PA school. Um, it really just depends on the type of learner you are. So, I guess me, undergrad, like I studied, but not PA school study. And I know that I'm a visual learner. So, like I said, I started doing study guides, getting pictures to help me visualize what's going on and why it's going on to understand better. So, it's really just diving into, excuse me, the type of learner that you are really, and using that to kind of tailor all of your study skills going further.
Yes. I'm trying to see if there's a question that we did not answer because we are running out of time. I see one question about financial aid. Is the grad plus loan the same as the parent plus loan? No, it's not. The grad plus loan is something that you will apply for independently, and they run your individual credit, and it's in your name completely. Did taking out loans scare you despite knowing it was an investment for the future? No, because I think that even though the cost of education has gone up, I think it's still a meaningful investment, and it's what I want to do, and I still think that the return on investment is still there. So taking out the loans, it was just a part of the process for me, and so I didn't focus on that. And I just I wanted to be a PA. This is part of the process for me, and so I know that in 30 or 40 years, those loans, the investment on those loans, it will come.
Definitely agree with Sydney. This is a huge investment, and you realize that, and the people around you realize that as well. I see two interesting questions from Quinn. Um, Undergrad GPA, science classes overall when you applied, as well as a gap year, if there's a preference for that. So I'm not sure if you asked that question because you have a non traditional undergraduate degree, but I was an engineer. By bachelor's degree, I guess. I did biomed in undergrad, and I did take a gap year, but that was mainly to get OChem and things like that to be able to apply to most PA schools. I worked as a CNA for a while, so I don't maybe had 1,000 hours. And each school will vary, but I think 1,000 is a really good cushion for most schools across the board. Um, Science classes, I took a lot of math, a lot of physics. So it really kind of just depends on what you're doing undergrad and how you can shape that to your PA career. Because you can almost do anything undergraduate and then kind of come up in the back half with like a biology or an OChem or something like that. That's not difficult, especially from like community colleges, and some online class or some online schools will do it too. Gap year, I think it's ultimately up to the school because I've done a gap year. I know people who did 3+2s. So they did 3 years of undergrad in like biology or something, and then they went straight to PA school after those 3 years and skipped that last year. So it really just depends on if you know what you want to do and PA school is it, do it. If you have the hours that you need, if you have your GPA and your test scores and you're not concerned and you have the things to apply, I would just go for it.
I agree. I think Ivy answered that question well. I'm going to answer another question I don't think we've gotten to from Rachel. It says, do you feel confident with the projected PA salary that you'll be able to pay off your loans in a reasonable amount of time while still having a solid quality of life? I do. I definitely do. I think that, of course, that can be kind of subjective into what salary is needed for a good quality of life. But I do know other PAs who have come out with a pretty significant amount of loans, and they've been able to still vacation and start families and buy houses while still paying off their loans. So I don't see that being an issue. And also, I want to reiterate that there are like loan repayment programs that exist as well. You can, sometimes work through the government for like if you work in like underserved areas. Sometimes that can help with loan reimbursement. So there are definitely options out there to pursue in terms of paying back your student loans.
Kind of to mirror what Sydney said, and there's plenty of PAs in the US. So somebody has done it before, and we're going to continue to do it because there's a very good job outlook for the profession. But something that I'm learning myself is to negotiate those things into a contract when you get a job. Like it's okay to do those types of things to help with loan repayment. I know some hospitals will give you like a 2 year window, say work for us for 2 years and we will start doing a loan repayment. So there's options and avenues. It's kind of just taking the initiative to not be aggressive, but to kind of throw it out there and see what you can get.
All right, so Dr. Donna Murray, she asked us to talk about our why before we wrap up. So I think this is a really good question, and I think this is kind of what keeps me going. And I'm gonna say that my why is simply because I love medicine. I love learning about medicine. I love incorporating and implementing medicine with my patients, and I think that the further you get into your education and the more interactions you have with patients, it's just really solidified, and my interest and my passion has grown to kind of keep me going. And I mean, I'm just amazed by the body and all that it can accomplish, and being able to truly help people achieve their best quality of life. So that is my why. That's what keeps me going. And just to emphasize, I think knowing this why and establishing this why is what will carry you and allow you to have them to continue to have motivation to get through the program, because it is tough. But as long as you remember why you're doing it, it is extremely possible and extremely rewarding.
Sydney hit the nail right on the head. um, my why is definitely being in an environment or growing up in an environment where healthcare was not valued, where the available healthcare to a lot of people in the city that I grew up in was either not appropriate, or it just seemed like those practitioners didn't care for the community. Most of them lived outside of the community. Most of them had never been in the community. And it was funny because the hospital that was 5 minutes from my home was where they said you went to die, instead of, driving 40 minutes up the road to go to a more established hospital. And I don't think that's fair, because not everybody can make it 40 minutes up the road. And I don't think it's fair to have a culture like that in today's society, especially with so much technology available. So it's just being able to help the people who I've seen, being able to be that voice, being able to be a safe space for somebody if you don't understand something, being able to be a friendly face for someone. Especially, with women and minorities, there's a lot of things that go unheard, a lot of things that go unseen, and being able to be a safe space for everybody, because I've heard it even just on rotations, like how impactful me just being in a room is. And I need everybody to feel that comfortable, because this is your entire life. These are your patients' entire lives, and they come to you for help. So they should be able to trust and to be comfortable and to know that they're in good hands.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to add, because I know we've talked a lot about like the workload and how challenging PA school is. I think just remembering that, like, this is the moment you've been waiting for. And I truly love studying medicine. Like I say, sometimes say, it can be so bittersweet, because it's exhausting and it takes a lot of work, but it's so interesting and it's super rewarding. And it really my curiosity continues to grow in learning about the body. So that definitely can have a really huge impact on your motivation to keep on chasing the dream.
Exactly. All right. Anything else that we didn't answer? Well, I know that this session is supposed to be over. I can throw my email in the chat, and Sydney as well, if she's comfortable. If you guys have any more questions, anything that we can kind of further help with, I would be more than glad to. Congratulations to all of you on even thinking of PA. It is a beautiful place to be.